Hi, welcome back to another TerranScapes video. This video will be part 2 of the modular boards that I recently completed. We'll be taking a look at the hill board, the river board, and a couple other of the types of boards available in this set or constructed for it. And if you have not looked at the first video, which shows some of the basic concepts about their construction and overall thinking in their design, you can take a look at that video following that link. So, because there's quite a bit to talk about with these boards, let's get started right away. I'll take you over to the bench and show them. So here you can see the first boards. We'll start sort of again with the simplest boards and move from there. This is the Chasm board, and what I've done is I've used the similar rock technique that I did for the rock outcroppings in the last video to edge the chasm, which is the most realistic chasm edge I've really done to date. As I've done before, what I do then is I underlay under the cut a very thin sheet of styrene that I paint matte black, just to kind of give it a little bit of an abyss feel. Sometimes I wish I was doing, like 2 or 3 inch thick boards so I could make these deeper, but we have to compromise. Now, the other thing that you might notice is that I really haven't put a lot of vegetation around this. I kind of figured if the ground is opening right in the soil, who's going to grow near it? So I left it a little bit thin to kind of give it a little bit of a variation from the other boards. And let's see if we can take a closer look at the rock texture. So you can kind of see that there. I was a little sad in the last video that my little bush did not come into focus, but it looks like we're getting this pretty good here. And let's turn it around. You can see the back side of it. There you go. So I really like how that came out. I can cut it, flush with the bottom of the board, and it just gives, I think, a much better look than some of the chasms that I've done in the past. So in any case, that is the chasm board, and let's take a look at another one. And so here is the dried earth board. That's kind of what I'm calling it, cracked earth. Basically dried ponds with the mud sort of having a cracked effect in it. Now, this is the first time I've done this on a verdant set, and I was sort of thinking, what's going on here? How come everything's growing around it and the ponds are dried up? And then I realized, perhaps these are vernal pools. So I did a little looky-look online to think about how vernal pools are typically, how they appear. And frequently they have, quite a bit of vegetation around them. After all, they are kind of ponds, and oftentimes, to be fair, they're in sort of a wooded or a much more heavily vegetated area. But, we make compromises. But I decided to take that look, vegetate it more heavily around it, and then plants that would normally be living when it is flooded, so if this is sort of spring, right, we haven't had the spring rains yet, something like that, to fill these. And then, so I've put in a couple different dead grasses, reeds, whatever, to kind of give it that feel like, okay, we're in a sort of dormant state for these. The cracked earth effect is done with Chroma Crackle, and I'll put a link to my video for Chroma Crackle here. I really like this. Now, I'm still playing with it, trying to get a larger crackle out further, but it does have to do with depth and the thickness of the pour, and I think the drying time. And after I did these, I even had some other ideas on how to improve it, which is not to say I don't like this, but you know me, I'm always trying to, tweak it a little bit. My only real question about this, you know what, let's take a quick look. So what I did, you can see here, right, is I put in a couple different grasses to give it a little bit more variation, and again, unique plants around specific features that aren't represented anywhere else, but of course some common ones that are elsewhere. Oh, another one of those bushes. Wait a minute. Let's do that. You gonna give me a focus? Come on. All right. Well, let's see. What if I do it from this side? Oh, I'm one of those guys. Focus, focus, focus. All right. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea. The only question I had about this is the color. So I left this with a sort of clay color, you know, a red clay, but perhaps that's wrong really for these board sets. So I thought I'd let the customer take a look at this, and if he'd like, what I can do is give it a gray wash, you know, something like that to mute that red and tie it in closer to the soils around it. Depends on whether, you know, you like it popping color-wise or having it be much more closer to the surrounding soil. To be fair, most of the vernal pools I looked at had a much more gray brown color for the mud than this. So, you know, it's really an aesthetic choice, and I'll let the customer make up his mind on that. But anyway, that gives you a look at the Cracked Earth vernal pool board. And so here is the cliff board. Not cliff, I don't know. The hill board. Now, the customer originally asked for a setup whereby there would be a pass through these two. Actually, this was originally going to be an ordinary hill board, and then I got excited about adding in this new rock texture, and when I mentioned it, the customer said, hey, that's a great idea. Let's leave a pathway between the two that vehicles could access, or troops, and that should be 3 inches across. And let's take a quick peek at that. Now, as I was working on it, I tried to slot it. So here you can see it's a little over 3, but it does get a little bit. I don't know if we can do this. Let's try this. This is what I was doing when I was working on it. There we go. There we go. So it's just about 3 at the base at its tightest point. And I did sort of raise this up and flatten it a little bit with a heavier amount of flock to make it look a little more flat for, you know, troops and whatnot walking through it. The hills themselves, again, like I've been saying for this board set, completely new technique for making them. I wanted something a lot more organic looking than ones that I've done in the past. So this has been shaped using plaster cloth over a substructure to give it much more texture laying around it, something a lot smoother, more irregular. Those are contradictory, but I think they're the same. They work here. And I really like it. I think it's a big improvement over what I was doing before. My wife was actually fairly impressed, and that's always a good sign. So a couple of thoughts about these before we look at some aspects a little closer. One of the questions for myself was, how can I maintain model stability on this with this kind of an organic look? So I did put in quite a few flat areas, Mr. Tippy McLean here for reference. Now, he has a terrible center of balance towards the back, so I've been using him as kind of my model to make sure that it is stable. What I did to extend this area is I put in some vegetation over the corners that would help to give a little bit extra support to miniatures, just a hair, so it expands that open top without giving it the appearance of a flatter, steeper drop-off. It was, you know, it's a little bit of planning as you go along. And what I tried to do was keep some areas that look more passable than others. For instance, you know, here where it's a bit steeper, so that it gives the, I think a more believable approach as miniatures come up. Boy, Tippy, he's doing all right there. That's a pretty gross angle for him. But again, a couple plants here help to even that out. And taking a look at the other side, similar things. We have quite a variety of flat areas. Notice here, again, something to just prop a miniature up without actually making this flat. Over here, same deal. So I was really pleased with how these came out, both in terms of their look and their playability. Again, kind of following on the theme of sort of semi-unique plants, I have put in some of those flowers to tie in with the rock outcropping, since this is a fairly rocky area. But then, because these are higher, I really had the advantage of putting in some taller vegetation that isn't necessarily going to get crushed or impede gameplay. And this is another version of the modification I've been doing with the sagebrush. It's something that I'm really still exploring quite a bit, but that sagebrush And I did this on the cliff project, if you saw that video, so I've been excited to start integrating it into other pieces. But the negative space that it provides in the interior is so key to making this kind of a plant look realistic. It's true with trees, it's true with anything that has a taller structure. That negative space, unless it's maybe a very dense conifer or something, really breathes life into those plants and makes them look so much more realistic. Now, I did have somebody mention that some dead vegetation would add interest to a lot of these kinds of spots. So I did put in just a couple little dead branches, but I don't have good dead pieces to represent some of these pieces of vegetation. So I tried to, by putting in some of these brown spots, to give the impression, is it its own plant? Is it a dead plant? A little hard to say, but it's the target goal that I was working on, I think the color contrast actually does make it a lot more interesting. Is it dead? I don't know. But in any case, so this gives you an idea of how the hills are going to be made going forward. A lot more organic, I just can't say enough about the increased visual interest. That I'm very pleased with it overall. And let's take a look at one more that's a little bit more dramatic. So this is the largest hill, and the customer requested for this one that it had some eroded areas that would provide sniper fire for miniatures. Now, using this rock technique, I was a little bit unsure of how to modify this to give an eroded look. Because I am using, I'm not going to go over it again, but this is a new technique for making rocks. Take a look at the previous video if you want to see more about that. But it meant that I can't easily cut and texture and build out in a way that would give me, small ledges or lips. I probably could, but I was a little unsure. So I proposed to the customer, how about a tunnel that would give miniatures the ability to fire through and give that some of that kind of a sniper feel, right? You can kind of tuck yourself in there. The other side, I think, is a little shorter. Let's take a look at that. It is just a little bit lower, so Mr. Tippy will not fit in that side. But assuming on how you interpret rules or whatnot, if he was kneeling, right, he could fire through this. So that was my goal with this. And the nice thing about this rock is that I cut the entire tunnel out of a single sheet of rock. Then molded it, flanges, tunnel, all of that, so that the interior, now whether that will be very easily visible, oh wait a minute, let's try it like this. There you go, you can get a sense. That rock texture carries all the way through the tunnel. It's a seamless join between the directions of facing, and I can't think of another way to get that kind of an effect other than using this kind of a material. Saying that, it was a bit of a bear to map all that out, and I had to make a template, modify the template, then cut this, trim it, heat it, seed it. That took a while, actually, but I think it looks good. I'm really happy with discovering that kind of flexibility and new ways to create new kinds of landforms. So again, this hill was made with the same idea, using plaster cloth over a substrate so that I could create a much more organic, varied texture on the hill itself. Again, lots of stability areas for miniatures. It's a relatively large plateau on the top, a couple pieces of vegetation, even too much for Mr. Tippy. No. Okay, well, depends on how he's facing, probably. No. He's very tippy, hence his name. But again, trying to provide some kind of an access point feel. So here, you know, I created a small lip, which could then be joined to here, which could then be joined to here. Because of the size of this piece, if you recall me talking about size on a board, it's difficult for me to get those transitions all the way around, and you can see here, very tight to the edge. I don't like doing that, but I really didn't want this to be like a strip hill, so I really needed to expand it out. Of course, I could have pinched the tunnel a little bit more, but it was, I don't know, it was a bit tricky, you know, working through it, and I didn't want to add, you know, a whole redo of it once I was kind of working on it. So this was the sort of end result that I came up with. Again, depending on how you play the rules would depend on how much accessibility the top has, but it's kind of interesting to think that it may only have a single access point. It's going to add quite a bit more strategy to occupying it and holding it, perhaps, depending on the game you're playing. So that takes a look at that. You know, again, new plants, unique for this board, plants that tie it in to other similar themed boards, new variations, new static grass, just really feeling very good about the overall movement that these boards have gone in since my last board set. It's rare that I say that, but I just feel like it is a big jump, and I'm pretty excited about that. And of course, you know, learning. Next one will be a little bit better, but I think I'm going really in the right direction. So now let's take a look at a couple of the river boards, and these were interesting to do. If you took a look at my styrene cutting video, then you know that what I did is I created a template that for the edges that comes down and allows me to pour the river at different depths and different widths. When I talked to the customer about this river, it became apparent that he wanted a couple things. He wanted a more natural color, which I think is going to be more standard going forward. Because I'm allowed to pour depths, I can give a nice, what's the word I'm looking for? You know, a transparent view into the water. So we'll be looking at this more often. Also, I was looking at, this is supposed to be modeled on the Rhone River, and I was going to put a bunch of pictures of the Rhone up, but I'm not going to do that. It's complicated, but basically it's got a silty edge, a silty shoreline, with this kind of a slow-moving, it is a slow-moving river. Now, of course, that varies maybe if you're at a tributary or something, but we're not there. So I wanted to give it a slow movement feel and try to give a very fine-grained edge to the water that would give it more of a silty appearance. And I think I did a pretty good job with that, and we can see at this corner here. Let's see if we can take a look. You know, that gives you a look at how the water join is. One of the things that I did, however, that the customer should be aware of is that I used Mod Podge for this surface. It's one of the few materials I have that will give, one of the few, it's the material that gives this gentle rippling effect. And of course, Mod Podge is a little bit softer. If you make a slight impression, it will restore itself, and you can even almost rub it out. But if you were to leave a miniature on here, say overnight, it will leave a disc that will not recover. So it just requires just a touch more care, or you know, preventative care, I should say, than some of the other water textures. And if it needs to be cleaned, just a dust with a damp cloth is all you need. Don't use alcohol on the cloth, as that will react with the Mod Podge, and it will not be a good situation. I've learned that in trying to work with it in the past. So, what else can I say about these boards? I'll tell you what, before I say anything else, let me pull another one and we'll take a look at that. So here we can see the river straight, and a couple things to more mention about these boards. One is that the shoreline of the Rhone is actually very densely vegetated. And that is a trick in terms of making these, of course, blend with the other boards, and allow miniature access to the river to cross it, something like that. So what I opted for is a much denser vegetation than on any of the other boards, but still providing, lots of spaces for miniatures to be able to, cross this. I did not put in any fords, as I've never seen any fords in the Rhone River, and what was I going to say? Oh, and the Rhone River doesn't really have much rock around it, except in some areas where it's been man-made and deposited, something like that. So pretty much rock-free all the way down the river. And what I tried to do, something else that's new, is because I'm allowed to pour deeper now, I can embed some vegetation. It's a long video. My brain gets tired. Limbs, logs, that sort of idea into the water, and some things that have drifted up onto the shore and gotten stuck there, that kind of an idea. I can put pieces in. I don't know if you can see that. Let's take a look and see if we can do a glare-free look. There we go. So, I can even throw some things in the water, have them at different depths. This did require multiple pours to bring it up to this height and to give me that transition visual down into the deeper areas. So that gives me a lot of flexibility to add things to this. And it is something I'm definitely going to be exploring more as I go forward with more riverways. And just before we leave the rivers, I just want to show you one more board. So this board shows the shoreline a little bit better. Let's take a look at that. I did this with a very fine-grained frit, which is actually a glass powder, to make this super smooth but not textureless transition here. And I did put just a couple rocks, but I put them in pretty deep so you can just barely get the impression that there just happens to be something under there, but it's really not a big visual impact. I think it just adds, just a pinch of variety to the rivers as you're looking down them, so to speak. So that gives you a look at the river boards and some of the, enhanced vegetation around it. Let's wrap it up. So that gives you a look at the second set of boards. Hopefully you found something interesting maybe for yourself to take away. I will say that it was quite a bit of learning all the way around to do some of these modifications. It has been a journey and a half to get to this point, but I really feel good about it, and I really wanted to sort of create a new standard for myself going forward. As I mentioned briefly before, I have some changes coming up, and so I really wanted to pimp out this set, as it were, so that it could be the new standard going down the road. So, of course, if you have any questions or comments, always welcome. Please feel free to leave them down in the description. Don't forget that I'm on Twitter, and don't forget also that you can submit questions to the Q&A, and we'll put that on the screen right there to remind you. And hopefully you will come back to see part 3 of this, because I will be back again soon with another TerranScapes video.